all, this is it. This is build day. I've been putting in a lot of time making these plans easily comprehensible to build in paper form. Now, usually I just use my laptop, pull up the CAD, get the numbers, and make each piece. For this one, I printed everything out. I put it in a binder. Got build notes, what you need, parts diagrams, full master list, and I've put part identifiers on each piece and then made a reference for that. Got all your notching, your bending, everything you need to build this. All right, first step, cut all the tubing. Now I buy all my tubing in 20-foot lengths because you save on money buying in bulk, and you don't have as much waste because you can just keep cutting on one piece until you run out. All right, it's time for the first cut. As you see, I always wear gloves. I wear safety glasses. I'm just gonna cut the parts right in order. Pay attention to the size of tubing. These are listed in build order, not cut order. Now, I'm not going to show you every single cut. There are 53 pieces of tubing for the main chassis. Now, when I mark this, I use kind of a thick permanent marker. I center it on the line that I want. So if it's 7/16, I'll mark the middle of the marker right on that 7/16, and then I'll try to just cut that line in half. Now, once it's cut, I'm going to tap the dust out of it, and then I'm going to label it. This is C1. One down. Nope. The lower hood is your first piece of .120. So there's a reason this is .120. First of all, it's your hood, it's your windshield, it's a primary structure of it. Secondly, it's in two pieces. You're making a full loop, and instead of making it 4 pieces welded together, it's 2. And it's got a sleeve that rides in the joints because butt welding is very, very unsafe. You have to sleeve either internally or externally to have solid structure. Now, .120 tubing has an inside diameter of 1.25 inches, and we've got a whole big bunch of 1 1/4 inch tubing over there. So it makes it easy to sleeve. You don't have to hit the machine shop. It's going to make for a nice tight joint. Is a random 1.5 inch thrown in there. Now, if you plan your tubes out, you can save a lot of money. This is the only waste from a 20-foot section of tubing. Crash course in bending. Now, I have a Rogue Fabrications M600 bender, and all of my bend points are based off of this machine. So in the instructions, it has the bend location at 5 1/4 inches from the bend point. If your bend point is different than that on your machine, you will need to adjust that number. So if your bend location starts at 5 inches, you'll need to subtract a 1/4 inch off of all of these numbers. If your bend location is 5.5, you'll need to add a 1/4 inch onto those. I can't calibrate these instructions for every machine out there. And knowing that will help you get calibrated and make accurate bends. Also, my spring angle is calibrated to this machine. I bent two 90-degree angles, one with 1.25 inches, one with 1.5 inches. So the spring angles represented are for those bends. It should be pretty close because bend angles or spring angles are more the material rather than the machine. I use this machine because it's a vertical bender rather than a horizontal. So you can take these magnetic angle finders and you can just plop it right on the tube, and you know exactly what angle the tube is at before you take it out of the machine. Your bends are super accurate. You can use a horizontal bender. I built 2 of these with a JD squared. A lot of calibration goes into those because you don't have the instant reading of your tube. So it's just pre-planning, getting used to your machine, and then using it correctly. A huge thing, and you want to do this before you bend your tube, is mark a direct line that shows one end to the other. You cannot do this after you bend it because you don't have a straight tube. So what I did is I got some 3/4 inch angle iron, and all you do is slide the tube up into there, and then you can mark one continuous line, and it is the same point from the front to the back. Now, when you get into the cut wrappers, they are aligned with the outside radius of the bend. So when you put this in the machine, you want this line facing directly down or on the outside of your bend, and then your cut wrappers will line up right with that line, and your notches will be perfect. The setup I have is based all around that to make everything more accurate. Alternatively, if you don't want to mark the entire length of the tube, you can just mark about the last 4 inches because that's where your cut wrapper is going to go. Alright, so the first bend, part C3, has 2 bend locations. The first one is at 3/4 and the second one is at 34 9/16. So I will mark it at 3/4, and then I'll mark it again at 34 9/16. Now the beautiful thing about this machine is that you can get multiple holder blocks. You set that one up on your second bend, then you can get an additional block and set that up on your first bend, and both of your bends are completely equal. They're on the same plane. You don't have to worry about any rotation from taking it out of the machine or moving it around. It just stays right where you want it. Now, something you want to do before you bend is mark that line for 90 degrees or 0 degrees. So you can get your caliper here, and you just put this guy right on that mark that you made, right dead center of it, of the outside radius. And remember, you want that facing down, the outside of the radius. So you set these up, you get your angle finder, you find 0 with your tube. And you lock down your brackets, make sure they're still aligned with your marks. And this piece will be bent exactly straight, or 1/10 of a degree off, which won't matter for dimension. You can get it to 0. I'll probably do that after I shut the camera off, but I wanted to give you a quick demonstration. All right, the first bend is 39.8 degrees with a spring back angle of 42. So I'm just gonna make that gauge read 42, then release the pressure, double check that it's 39.8, then we'll pull it out, and that will be done. And there's 42. Now just release the pressure until this is loose. Well, we have 38.45, and we were shooting for 39.8. Hit it again. All right, so now we're just gonna reset it to our second bend location. Bring our ram all the way back to 0. Pull the pin. And reset for the second bend. Now this is perfectly in line, in straight because of how the clamp blocks work. Zero it. We are within a half a degree. And there you have it. Your first piece is bent. Ready to go. My only advice is to treat every piece like it is your work of art. So this one, as you can see, I've got 4 bends in this one tube. This is the main roll bar. So I just laid it down, found my marks, hooked it up, and now it's ready to bend. Too easy. Rogue Fab does not sponsor me. They did not give me this bender, but I will shamelessly give them a plug. This is an amazing machine. Instead of starting with this bend and loading it in from the back, I'm gonna start at bend 4. I'm gonna bend this, remove the block, bend this, remove the block, bend this, remove the block, bend that, remove the block, and it'll be done, and I won't have to reset the roller. This machine is cool. Conversation, a one-way conversation, and that's about parts C16 and C17. These are the complicated bends in this. There's no way to avoid it. To get the look and the rear end, they had to be bent on a multi-plane angle. So do what you've been doing. Use your angle iron to mark your outside radius on your ends. Now, this is probably the main reason I went with this bender. This bender does multiple angle bends multiple axis, multiple angle bends very, very well. So as you can see, I got six of these blocks. Now, I didn't need to, but this is the only way to make sure it is perfectly square and perfectly accurate for your bend and rotation angles. Now, how the plans are written, if you look, it says all of the orientations are from the start. Okay? So your first bend has a 0 rotation and it's a 90-degree bend. Alright, so now I've got all of my bend locations. I'm going to slide on my first bracket. This is going to represent bend number 1. Now if you look at the orientation or the rotation angle of bend number 1, it is 0. Now the reason this is critical is because this is a very long piece of tubing. So even a half a degree can set you off pretty far. I try to get within 1/100th of a degree, if not right on. Now bend 2 is, depending on if you're doing the left or right, -5.9 or +5.9. Now the reason I have 6 of these is so I can lay it out and see that they are opposite of each other. So this one, I rotated the tube clockwise for the second one. So this one I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise. Now I've done this on my JD squared horizontal bender. And I basically just took my time. This is not a quick single bend outside radius deal. This is a complicated bend, so take your time with it. So our next one is -4.8, but it's -4.8 from the start. So you need to index it before you bend anything. Get one of these little doodads, lock it on with your bender, and then you will have your rotation from the start at all times. So if you're using a horizontal bender and you have this hooked up, you leave it hooked up, and that way you can index all of your bends as you go. That's how I did it with my horizontal bender. The final bend is 4.8 degrees from the start. I'll lay these out so you can see. They're marked in the same location, but they are the exact opposite. This is what you should have. You should have 2 pieces that are exactly mirrored from each other with the uprights parallel. Alright, so I guess the first step of notching is setting up your notcher. This is a Rogue Fabrications Versa notcher. I started with a Notch Master, and I didn't like it very much, so I got this Rogue Fab. This was the first thing I ever bought from Rogue Fabrications, and it's really, really sturdy, really nice, and that's what made me start looking at the bender a little more closely. It has hard mount, so you can screw it to your workbench, or it's got this long tab so you can just vise it in on your workbench. I don't use it all the time, so I like being able to just put it in my vise, use it, and then shove it back out of the way so I have more countertop for other stuff. You grab the binder, open to the first notch. Now the first notch is on C3, C1, C2 don't get a notch. And on here you have your cut size, which is 1.5 inches, your cut angle, your offset, which is up or down, your setback, which is 0 because we're cutting off the end of the tube. Rotation 360. This lines up with the outside radius. All right, we've got C3 here, and something that might save you some time and some effort is if there are mirrored parts, you can do them at the same time, but make sure you keep your cut wrapper straight. These are going to have the same angle, and these are going to have the same angle. So you can do them up at the same time, do both your cuts, and you're resetting your machine less. So, we'll just get started here. Tear this out. I'll leave a little extra on the end to help wrap around the tube. And I don't cut the lines That's a amateur move to cut it out line for line because your hole saw is just going to cut the paper off. So then you fold it on the red line. Now this is what the start end diagram is for. We're working on the main floor right, so the start is going to be the shorter bend in the front. This is the long bend on the back. So the end that we just cut out is going to go on the long part back here. This is where that line we made comes in handy. So you can see it there. Our cut wrapper goes 2 inches from the end. You just line the blue line up with it and the red line up with your notch location, wrap it around. If you're doing multiple pieces or you just want to do all the labeling first, you can put your cut angle right on there and then you'll know it when you take it to the machine. I'm just going to cut the one and then I'm just going to get to work and cut the rest instead of doing the montage thing. So just to make sure this is covered, what I did was I created a parts diagram that has the start and ends of the tube. The S represents the start. So on this one there's a long side and a short side, which is this piece has a long side and a short side. The start is on the long side. So if your cut wrapper says start, put it on the start side. Alright, so I'll cover one straight piece. Spray it down, clean it up if there's oil on it. And then you're going to want to mark a straight line from side to side. So use your 3/4 angle iron. Mark a good bit down there. Mark a good bit over here. And the cut wrappers are set up a little differently. 26 3/4 to the second one and 29 to the end. So instead of measuring just the very end of it, you're going to measure all the way down. Mark it on your center line mark that lines it up. And the second one is also 20 inches to the end. And as I said, on the straight tubes, you don't need to worry about an outside diameter. You don't have to worry about the starter end. You can just throw the labels on either side and it'll work out as long as they're aligned. Alright, so you see with the cut wrappers on, there's a second number on there, and that's 26 3/4 to the second. That's a way to verify that your cross member is the correct length. You want your cross members to be the exact length because they add strength. Another thing I love about this Rogue Fab notcher, it can be a vise for when you need to angle grind your notches. Well done. Let's you and me have a conversation about piece C24 here. Now if you look, cut wrappers are absolutely crazy. This is not how it looks, but that is how the output comes about. So do the same thing you've been doing, mark your ends. Mark them a little wider for this. Now this piece is one of the main things that makes this a VF. Now what it is it's 2 separate hole saw shots spaced at the correct width and distance from the end. You can see here it is a 1.5 inch hole saw. Has a cut angle of 0 or 90 degrees. Offset is 1/4 of an inch. Offset is the height up and down on the tube. So you're not going to cut it straight across. You're going to offset it down 1/4 inch. The negative 1/2 inch to the second just means the wrappers overlap. So all you do is take the start point, mark this at 1/2 inch, and then you line up your second one. Alright, so there's the line we put on the wrapper, and here's the line from the second one, which is 7 inches from this end. This one is 7 inches from this end. They overlap by 1/2 inch. Now you can see the offset, how there's going to be material remaining on the top. So you're not cutting these ends off. This is all going to stay as one piece with 2 holes in it. All right, this is what I'm talking about with offset. Right now it's at 0, and we need to go a 1/2 inch down. See how there's some remaining on the top? This is what your piece should look like when you're done. Don't forget to reset your offset. The time has come for assembly. Now, I've laid all the pieces out right and left. I've got the jig set up, and I'm just going to follow the parts diagram. I haven't trimmed any of the notches. I haven't trimmed any of the tubes. I haven't test fit this. This is purely just to see how it goes together off of basic bending and basic notching. No smoke and mirrors, no tricks, no editing. We're going to assemble this for the first time together. Well, this isn't my first time, but it's the first time I've done it in this fashion where I've just laid everything out and then assembled it all at once. So let's have at it. There it is. I didn't put the cross members in because they fit tightly, and I did not clamp the rails to the jig, but everything fits right as it should. That's just painter's tape. I wanted to keep this real and honest, so all the parts falling off because the tape didn't stick is all real. Some of these joints are aligned in multiple places, so I couldn't put it on because you have to trim up the notches to get everything to fit. Yeah, that's going to tack up really, really nicely, and it's perfectly square. Your front end, you're not going to be riding crooked. Your back end, you're not going to have, you know, case of the dog butt. Everything is just fit up really, really well. And that's without measuring anything. That's just looking at the picture and assembling it as so. Now, this bottom square, as soon as you tack it in, that's going to be your stronghold for everything else. That looks good. Looks real good. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it.